How did you imagine this story and this character?
Well, when I first started writing the books, almost 10 years ago, is when I started writing the first book, Hush Hush. And my husband had just enrolled me in a writing class. That's how I got started writing the book. And, you know, I was just imagining memories from my own high school years. And that's how, you know, I wasn't really envisioning this story world at that point. I was just writing about experiences that happened to me and, you know, transforming that into a book about these two characters, Patch and Nora.
So, when you were young, did you like to confide in the diaries or just simply write?
Yes, I loved writing in my diary, in my journals. From the time I was a little girl all the way through high school and college, I was so faithful about writing in my journal, and I'm glad that I did that because now that I'm an adult, I can go back and I can reread these diaries I kept when I was a little girl and remember what it feels like to be a teen and what it feels like to fall in love for the first time, to feel betrayal for the first time, all of those rich emotions that you feel during your teenage years.
If the Hush Hush series will be adapted to the cinema, what will be your casting? For example, for Nora, Patch, V?
You know, that question, it's so tricky for me to answer because when I started writing Hush Hush almost 10 years ago, the actors that I kind of had, you know, picturing in my head, well, they're all too old now. But the actors that I was picturing, so for Patch, I imagined Stephen Strait. He's not very well known, but he was in a movie called The Covenant. And then for Nora, I was imagining Emmy Rossum, who you might know from The Phantom of the Opera. And, you know, obviously they've aged and they're too old to play the parts now, but those are definitely two actors I was thinking of when I wrote the book. Oh, and I forgot to mention Scott. I was thinking of a young Channing Tatum. I mean, I think every author gets really excited when they find out their movie rights have sold and, you know, there's that potential for a movie because you get to see your story and your characters brought to life in a new medium, which is very exciting, of course. And, you know, I know that many of my readers really hope for a movie, and maybe someday that will happen.
Which character of Hush Hush Saga is your favorite and why?
My favorite character to write is definitely V, Nora's best friend. Her character was inspired by two of my childhood best friends. I was very quiet and reserved as a teenager, and two of my friends were these wild, outgoing, obnoxious at times girls, and they were so good for me because they got me to do things that I never would have done on my own. And so I feel like when I'm writing V, it's a bit of a trip down memory lane, and I get to relive, you know, what it felt like growing up with these girls.
All of the Hush Hush fans will be afraid to the end of the story and the relationship with your character, as me. And what about you?
I mean, it's always hard to say goodbye. Saying goodbye is never easy, and I did. I turned in the final draft of finale to my editor back in May, and I was done with the book at that point, you know, before it went to print. And I felt really sad, and I wondered if I'd ever be able to write another book and if I'd ever be able to connect with other characters. But I think that's part of being a writer is exploring new worlds and working with new characters and pushing myself to try things that I've never done before. And I feel like it's time to move on. And I guess the final thing is, the good thing about books is they're never really over. You can always go back and reread about the same characters and the same story again and again and experience it over and over. At this point, I feel like the stories are done. I wrote the 4 books, and that's all that I have for Patch and Nora's story.
On what are you currently working now? What are your projects?
I just sold a new young adult book to my publisher, and it's also for young adults. It's a thriller about a young girl who goes backpacking in the mountains, and she becomes stranded up there with a killer, a man who's been killing girls, and she is his next target.
Mm-hmm.
Did you imagine such success with Nora and Baldji?
As I mentioned earlier, I started writing Hush Hush almost 10 years ago in this writing class that my husband enrolled me in, and I started sending the story out to publishers shortly after that class. And over the next 5 years, I would continue to try to get the book published. And during that 5-year period, I received just short of 100 rejection letters. So it was a very long process for me. And, you know, I remember thinking that it would take a miracle to get the book published. So to answer you honestly, no, I didn't imagine that the books would be published anywhere outside the US. I thought I'd be really fortunate if I could even just get it published there.
What is your relationship with your friends? Is it important for you?
Well, I think one of the wonderful things about being a writer right now is that we have social media, and I can go online and I can talk with readers all over the world and answer their questions and be involved in their discussions, which I do. I really enjoy that. I enjoy getting feedback. I enjoy getting to know the people who are reading my books, and I feel very lucky that I'm able to do that.
Which books were important for you as you grew up?
I remember some of the first book I really remember falling in love with as a little girl was Matilda by Roald Dahl. And you know, you might be aware that Matilda loved to read. Well, I loved to read as a little girl, and I remember when I finished the book, I sat in my bedroom with a pencil on the floor and I stared at it, and I tried to get that pencil to move with my mind because I wanted to be just like Matilda, and I thought I could be. I also loved Little House on the Prairie, especially Little House in the Big Woods. I wanted to be just like Laura and Mary. I had an older sister, and we were such tomboys, and I wanted to live the adventures that they lived, you know, living out in this dangerous place with bears and cougars. And yeah, I did love those books very much. When I was older, as a teenager, 2 books that I remember really loving are Wuthering Heights and Phantom of the Opera, because I was very taken with these creepy gothic stories where, you know, monsters lived, and I liked that idea of being scared but at the same time being in love, and all of these intense emotions that you feel as a teenager.
What is your favorite supernatural characters? Surely Angel?
Yes, I mean, I think that's why I chose to write about angels. Was I love the idea of characters who are seeking redemption, characters who've made mistakes, and, you know, they've gone down the wrong road, and they're struggling and trying really hard to get back to making good decisions and being good people. And I think that's why Patch loves Nora so much, is that she reminds him of the guy he used to be before he fell from heaven.
How do you think one becomes an angel? How would you describe it? The fact of becoming an angel?
In my stories.
Yes.
In the books.
Ouais.
In my books, you know, I imagined this world where at one point there were no fallen angels. There were all of these angels living in heaven, but I didn't want them to be these perfect beings. I wanted them to be more human, more susceptible to making mistakes. And, you know, just like we make mistakes and, you know, become, we fall prey to sin, I wanted these angels to have that opportunity, I guess, to make choices and choose right or wrong. And some of them did. They did really bad things. They made bad choices, and when that happened, their wings were ripped out so that they could not fly back into heaven, and they were banished, kicked out, down to go down to earth and live among humans, and, you know, kind of suffer on earth.
Thank you very much to answer my question.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Those were great questions.
Yeah.
Some of them I'd never been asked before.
Yeah.
coming, Barbara. Thank you guys. Take care. Bye.